Ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, I've been looking at body composition for over 40 years. Underwater weighing, skin fold measurement, DEXA, the whole shooting match. This is ridiculous how easy this thing is.
Body composition really has stolen the show over the last couple of years. It's not BMI, it's not body weight that we're talking about. We're talking about actual muscle, actual distribution of fat and muscle around the body. And yeah, basically when we were able to develop body composition from the camera of your phone, comparable to a DEXA scan in accuracy, which is basically like a full body X-ray, it's considered the gold standard that most consumers have access to.
It is so nice to see, I think, that finally body composition is getting the recognition and access that it deserves, because a lot of people, I think, ignore how important it is. I think a lot of women wait until they're hit menopause to get a DEXA scan and to see where they are.
But
still, Joe Bug and Donuts will have no idea what their body composition
Stop
is.
trying to lose weight. Start trying to build lean mass. The latter will drive the former. Are you seeing the lean mass, fat mass ratio in your data that you're seeing? Are people tying into that? Number two, do you think GLP-1s are a boom to your business, or is it going to be a bust to the business?
GLP-1s are a miracle drug, and they are going to continue to get better, but they have really big downsides right now.
Welcome back to the 90% Healthy podcast. I'm your co-host, Klaudia, and today I'll introduce everybody else. But before I do, I wanted to tell you what we're going to talk about. And if you have one of these, which is a smartphone, for those of you not watching but listening, you're going to listen in, because this conversation will show you how you can measure so many aspects of your health with your smartphone, including body composition, HRV. You don't need hundreds of dollars of wearables or equipment, but we have the brain and the mind behind figuring out how to use the camera on the smartphone, to do a whole body composition analysis. Welcome, Jason Moore. You're a visionary, and we are so thrilled to have you on.
Thank you, Claudia. Yeah, thanks. And good to see you too, Don. I'm happy to be here.
Well, right before we started recording, I said, no good deed goes undone. Jason, I think I was on your podcast for the first time nearly 10 years ago.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you might have been the most visited guest. I think we did like three or four episodes, maybe more. I don't know, but yep, lots of
I can see why.
But no, this was really cool, and with the emergence of your new technology, I was excited to turn around and return the favors. So that's what we're going to be talking: body comp and mobile tech today as we start to move through. So Klaudia, back to you on the new frontier.
Yeah, I wanted to give a bit of a bio of Jason, because it's really impressive. And a lot of you who have been listening for a while now, you have heard Don and I talk about measuring your HRV through the cell phone. Now it's Elite HRV, and that's, again, something Jason has brought to the market. So he's truly democratizing and making these gold standard measurements accessible to everybody in a way that is changing the game of how we measure our health long term. And you've been backed by $13 million of funding. The scan that we're talking about, which is the app called Spren, has over 74,000 scans registered. I just did mine this morning, and it is freaking impressive. I've had a DEXA done, I've done InBody, and it's wild to just do a scan of your body using your cell phone front camera, like a selfie. And except you're not wearing a lot of clothes, which I hope a lot of us aren't taking on a regular basis. And yeah, so tell me a little bit.
OnlyFans account.
Seriously.
Instagram
Jason,
and TikTok.
What's got you into this? I mean, this has been in the works for a decade. I mean, Don talked to you. Don was on your podcast at the very beginning of this journey.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks. It has been a journey for sure, and definitely appreciate the investors and the amount of money and time and that people have put into this beyond me, for sure. Yeah, basically, there's been a few legs to the journey, and we can go into whatever details you want or think is useful for people, but it all started with Elite HRV, going really deep on deriving insights from HRV, and that's what Don and I connected over in the early days, and he had his expertise, back working with Elite elite athletes and wrestlers and showing the world what HRV could do when applied to human performance. And, Don, as you know, the story is that actually that those same principles apply to a lot of different aspects of health and well-being and longevity. And so over the years, our early adopters were athletes and research labs and sports teams and things like that already basically were measuring things like HRV, but using the expensive equipment and the lab equipment and things like that. But then they're like, our compliance goes way up if we make it easier for people and put it into the fund. But we still need that high quality data and we need the high quality insights. And so that's kind of how we got started. As it expanded more into, let's say, just wider adoption of health and wellness seekers and fitness seekers and longevity now being a key word in all of that, we realized that when you break down these barriers of access, you just blow open the doors on the use cases, basically. And we started to learn so much from the community who are measuring everything from trying to manage like chronic fatigue or chronic health conditions and autoimmune conditions and post-surgery recovery, psychological health, and all of this stuff. Of course, 1,000 flavors of sport performance and athletic performance as well. So that's kind of the tailwind or the wind in our sails of wanting to keep innovating and saying, what barriers can we continue to break down? And along the way, we basically discovered that the camera of the phone is a very powerful sensor. And all of the modern smartphones basically have these really powerful cameras in them that make it easier to take pictures of your kids and your cats and your weddings and, whatever else is going on in your life. That same sensor can actually pull physiological insights out of the body when you train the right models. And so we went all in on that basically because we were getting a lot of pressure to create a wearable because around 2020 or so, there was, we were growing, we were a profitable business, reaching hundreds of thousands of people at that point. And people were like, oh, well, you should create a wearable. And we were like, well, there's some really great wearables already out there in 2020. And we didn't really necessarily a path for us to create something different than what was already out there in the wearable space. Not that no one could, it's just that we didn't see a path for us to do that. And instead, we saw this path with the camera. We started that innovation, raised some capital around that, and we're very successful with getting camera-based heart rate, camera-based HRV, camera-based respiration rate. Right now in the Spren app, you can put your finger over the camera and use your fingertip to measure those 3 markers. We have a face-based version of that that's completely contactless that Don knows a little bit of behind the scenes about. That's not available to the public, but it's in our R&D pipeline. And then body composition really has stolen the show over the last couple of years because even though we can all be definitely big fans of HRV in this call, in this cast. And the world, I think, is benefiting more and more from HRV every day and every week. But body composition is something that, one, everyone kind of understands it. And it does take a little bit of explanation to say it's not BMI, it's not body weight that we're talking about. We're talking about actual muscle, actual distribution of fat and muscle around the body. And yeah, basically when we were able to develop body composition from the camera of your phone, comparable to a DEXA scan in accuracy, which is basically like a full body X-ray. It's considered the gold standard that most consumers have access to. That's just another innovation that has blown down the doors of use cases. And now we're learning a lot from the community. You mentioned 75,000-ish scans. We're almost double that now. So it's growing quickly. And yeah, so we're excited to kind of shout from the rooftops about it.
So Jason, before we really go down the rabbit hole of body comp, I want to take a step back because I want our audience to appreciate your journey here. You didn't start off as a fitness biohacker type. You were working in the oil industry in Houston, Texas. Tell me about the seed? Tell our audience about the seed that flipped you from a landman to an AI tech guy in health and wellness and performance.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, it's funny because it makes more sense after the story because it's kind of not intuitive going into it. But I was a competitive athlete growing up. I stalled out kind of in my late teens, early 20s. Things got harder. My parents were always kind of like wrestling with health a little bit, and there's a lot of health challenges in my family. I basically like to say that all of the top 10 health killers are within like one person of me in the family. So it's very,
Gosh.
yeah, it's very close to home.
Right.
And
Which, now wait a minute. But the thing is, a lot of people have,
Yes.
you're not that unique. There's a lot
right.
of people that deal with this. So don't think that, that the Moore family is particularly tragic. This is something that most Americans deal with.
That's a very good point. Yeah. And that's, the funny thing is like, I'm always just kind of an open person that will say whatever basically. And, but when I say things like that, no matter who I'm talking to, I always get a lot of like nodding of recognition of like, oh yeah, like somebody very close to me has struggled with X, Y, or Z, or maybe they personally are struggling with, X, Y, or Z. So I think in 2025, and I felt this, over the last 20 years, is that it's really difficult for anyone not to pay attention to health and
Right.
well-being. And so that was in my life as well, but I've always been a tech guy. So my dad was the CTO of a tech company, and then I was exposed to that from a young age, and I studied it in college, and then I got my job in the oil industry. It was just basically the highest paying job offered that I got out of school, which at that time is the priority, at that age especially. But I got very lucky. It was an amazing job. And so what I was doing was out in the oil field, all this expensive, complex, dangerous equipment needs to be maintained. It's, it's high dollars for the company for production, but it's also high risk for people who are working on it, right? So if it fails, it can kill people and cost the company millions of dollars at the same time. So they take preventive and predictive maintenance very seriously in that industry. And so I was learning through that early job and that work, like how to build software and user interfaces around predictive and preventive maintenance that takes data from all these different sources and says, look, if we just, the analogy is like the car, right? If we just change the oil on the car once in a while, the engine will run much better for a much longer period of time. And pretty much everybody gets that and does that with their car. But you can take that analogy much further. And I also was seeing that weirdly, we don't do that with our body, or at least not 20 years ago. It wasn't as common for people to be talking about preventive and predictive maintenance of the body. So because of my own struggles with my performance declining in sports, plus health, plus all these other things going on, I was like, going down the rabbit hole of trying to figure out why health and fitness was so hard. And I became a personal trainer. I did end up becoming a coach and helping open some gyms in Texas as a side hobby passion. And then created Elite HRV basically because I read research about heart rate variability and was like, this metric is awesome. Why can't we measure it? There's no real tools to measure it, and decided to create one. And I didn't have a business plan or anything. It's just basically like, I wanted the data, I wanted a way to do it, plus I had this kind of tech and entrepreneurial orientation. So we created Elite HRV. I went to a conference and spoke about it. I got 20 people's email addresses. I emailed them and told them, hey, I made this app with my friend and co-founder at the time. And they picked it up. And then like literally a few months later, I was connecting with Don and I was like, there was all these fireworks going off in my head because I really didn't know a lot other than the research I had read and just sort of my own personal journey. I didn't really know a lot. And Don and I, this is a complete tangent, but it's just to illustrate the learning journey. Don and I ended up a few years later down in Florida working with the special forces and basically talking about biomarkers for warfighters, overtraining, and helping them with that high performance lifestyle. And I was very out of my league basically in that
Trust
meeting.
me, we all were that day. That was something.
That was something. There was some brightest minds that the U.S. government and like the scientific community has all in one room. And I was there. Don fit in. He's underselling his contributions because he was one of the stars of the show. And I said something like, oh, I made a comment about overtraining out loud to the group. And Don was like, well, actually, and with this group, it's about under recovering, not overtraining. And he very smoothly recalibrated my view of the universe that there are certain populations that don't have a choice. They have to train hard and push harder. And then that actually cascaded into a realization that that's the case for a lot of people. You got to go to work. You got to deal with your kids. You got to pay the bills. You got to get up and go and do the things that life demands of you. And it's more about balancing the recovery side of it than it is doing less of all that stuff. Anyways, that was total tangent, but
No, that's fine.
that's been some of the learning journey and some of the power of just kind of being an open mind and being in the right
Jason,
place at
you
the
can
right
go off
time.
on a tangent if it's about me anytime. Okay.
Okay, perfect.
No, but listen, I appreciate, because I think people need to understand the backing of this, because
Yeah.
you weren't a fitness nerd like so many people are. By the way, we're going to have Tommy Wood on the podcast next.
Oh, amazing.
So going back to that group. So, but the thing you said something a minute ago that is our body composition scans outpacing your HRV scans.
Today they are, yes.
So this is what makes me kind of nuts. While there's a lot of things contributing to that, this is one of the things I recognize. I think HRV is the king KPI.
Hmm.
We've had this discussion. We've talked about it 1,000 times. My early professional career was in body composition. I was working with wrestling and looking at performance in wrestling and body comp analysis. I've spent a lot of time there. What is it? Is it the vanity of the human animal that's driving this? Why is body comp so much more popular? Is it more approachable? Is it more understood? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I think, I agree, by the way, that HRV is like a universally applicable metric. And I think that there's a confluence of things, but body composition very easily fits into, let's say, the three buckets of performance, health, and aesthetics, right? And so pretty much everyone has some combination of desire or need in those three buckets, and it's different levels for different people, right? Obviously, if you're an athlete, then performance is probably one of the most important things to you, and then depending on how old of an athlete you are, aesthetics might be like a close second, and then health may be a long third. But let's say in other types of populations where, let's say like a age group athlete or something like that in triathlon might be like, I want to balance performance and health, and I don't care as much about aesthetics, right? So in any case, body comp just squarely fits into all three of these categories in a way that's a little bit more intuitive for the average person than HRV. So HRV, and another way to look at it is that body composition is almost like an outcome that you can use as a bookend to a journey, right? And so let's say I want to go from A to B. I'm going to establish my baseline by measuring my body composition, and then I will do some behaviors and track maybe HRV alongside those behaviors to balance my stress and recovery or my nervous system or things like that along the way, and then measure body composition again to see if I'm getting where I want to go. We know, of course, that you can use HRV that way to a degree as well, but it's not, I would say very few people think of HRV as an outcome to measure as kind of a benchmark, unless your HRV is like super low or something like.
Well, and I think we could probably do an entire episode. So I don't want to really go down this rabbit hole, but I at least want to touch it. That when you have stress, it will lower your HRV. It will also promote cortisol production, extended cortisol production throughout the day. Extended cortisol production throughout the day lowers your ability to utilize stored fat. It actually causes you to store more fat. So that stress response that we're measuring with HRV is also contributing to the adipose that you're laying on that you're not particularly fond of. Now the other, but I want to move down the tracks just a little bit here, and I want to establish I am not a fan of body fat measurement. I think people become too obsessed with it. I
Yep.
am a huge fan of lean mass measurement. Lean mass is the predictor of success in athletics, in longevity, in life. And I think it's important that for our listener that is, that's working on the 90% healthy pathway, wanting to move forward, to start to get their head around lean mass, because We live in a time that's really interesting right now, Jason. When we met 10 years ago and talked about it, loss of fat mass was basically from starvation and caloric output. Now we have this really interesting tool that has emerged with hormone modification called a GLP-1, and they are amazing. Okay, but the problem is that we're seeing a drop in lean mass,
big time,
not just a drop in fat mass. And I think that if this is something that you're on the longevity journey, you're trying to get more out of your days, more years out of your, what is it? More days out of your life and more life out of your days. If you're on that pathway, lean mass is critical. So for someone who's starting down the GLP-1 pathway, I don't see how you avoid either investing in regular DEXA scans, or set this. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, I've been looking at body composition for over 40 years, underwater weighing, skin fold measurement, DEXA, the whole shooting match. This is ridiculous how easy this thing is. You go through the entry of the app, and the app says, set the phone on the floor and prop it up. And then it just walks you through this process. And you're like, really?
Takes 30 seconds, not even.
It's awesome. And so tell me a little bit. Number one, are you seeing the lean mass, fat mass ratio in your data that you're seeing? Are people tying into that? Number two, do you think GLP-1s are a boom to your business, or is it going to be a bust to the business?
Yeah, it's great. This was, I mean, as usual, Don, I need you by my side just explaining this to other people as well, because people really zero in on the body fat percentage a lot. And, I think that is sort of maybe also related to your earlier question about aesthetics, that people kind of obsess a little bit about the aesthetic piece. And it's, understandable. It's visceral. It's what you can kind of see in the mirror, so to speak. But visceral as another word that actually has meaning here. And of all the fat numbers, so to speak, it's the visceral adipose tissue, or that fat around the organs in the midsection, that is really the only one that matters for health.
Which is very stress related.
Yes.
It's literally tied hand in hand.
Right. And it's a great point, what you said earlier about HRV. Basically drivers of visceral fat, include sedentary lifestyle, inflammatory foods, excessive stress and cortisol, basically, but all of those kind of manifest in a similar way as stressors in the body, and, lack of sleep, financial stress, all of these things, right? So, and that one, we basically, I'll come back to the lean mass because that's a bigger and more important subject, but just to round out that body fat percentage one, is DEXA scans will give you this ratio called android to gynoid fat percentage and ratio. So
could you explain for our listeners what that means, just to make sure in terms of what we're looking at?
For sure. You basically have regions of the body that are labeled with these labels called the android region of the body, which is that abdominal midsection area. And then the gynoid is more around the hips. It's like the hips and the upper thighs. And it's basically a proxy measure. You can think of it as like the apple-shaped body versus the pear-shaped body, right? And those tend to be, like, an apple-shaped body tends to correlate with a more masculine hormone profile, and a pear-shaped body tends to correlate with a more feminine hormone profile. You're thinking more testosterone relative to estrogen and these other balances of hormones. But also, in general, if you have a high android fat percentage relative to gynoid, it essentially means you're carrying more fat around the midsection, which has a higher correlation with that visceral adipose tissue and tends to be negative for health outcomes. And so that is the one for, as far as the realm of fat goes, that I recommend people pay attention to. The good news, though, is that, like what Don said about lean mass, is when you're translating these metrics into the behaviors that you should do, it actually ends up working better for most people to focus on lean mass anyways. And so because the behaviors that build and maintain lean mass, and also if you're managing your stress and getting enough sleep and doing these things, that like android to gynoid ratio and the visceral adipose tissue, most of the time takes care of itself. Now, there's for sure medical conditions that need medical care, and I'm not saying that as a blanket for all people in all conditions. But as far as like things that you can do, let's focus more on the lean mass and say that, to your point, Don, GLP-1s are, a miracle drug, and they are going to continue to get better, but they have really big downsides right now. And those downsides can be mitigated with a little bit of, thoughtful care. So they've been a boon to our business, and we have, I don't know the exact number, but thousands of people who have been already coming to Spren to track their body composition.
I don't remember when I was checking in. Did you ask me if I use GLP-1s on the onboarding?
No, actually, we don't ask. That is we're in the pipeline is a way that we want to help people more specifically with those, but you can definitely use the platform in its current form.
Absolutely.
And we get a lot of anecdotes already that says, hey, look, I went on medically assisted weight loss drugs and I've been losing weight, which is very exciting to me. But when I measured with your app, it was showing me that I was losing more than half of it was lean mass. And so because we were relatively new in the market when all of this stuff came out, a lot of those people were like, I don't believe it. So they basically went to their doctor, and the doctor prescribed them to do, a DEXA scan or another, type of scan. And it confirmed exactly what we were telling them. And the doctor was like, one, you should keep using this app. And two, the app recommends for anyone who's trying to lose fat or lose weight that you should be paying attention to protein intake, paying attention to your resistance training, doing all these other things that you can to increase the anabolic profile, I guess, of your body.
And this is the challenge. Okay. This is the entire challenge. And literally, I've been looking for this for 40 years to figure out how to do this, because when someone walks in, my first job was working in a fitness facility, managing a fitness facility. And when a female walks into a fitness facility, she comes in having tried 8 different programs on her own and failing. And she finally comes in, and this was a big deal to me and my staff. I said, listen, this is how we have to deal with this. And you have to start the mind shift right there. You have to start the psychological mind shift right there, from a mindset of starvation and cannibalism, self-cannibalism, to a mindset of building and again, whether it's protein or lean mass or all those things, it's about eating more, not less. It's about working more correctly, not less. And so your tool is a modern we called it somatotyping back when I was in grad school. That there was a psychologist in the feast. And again, that was my grad school was as close to that as we are to my grad school right now. So for what it's worth. And they talked about mesomorphs, ectomorphs, endomorphs, the different body types. And you have just taken somatotyping and brought it through the window of the camera using modern day computer vision, depth mapping, body segmentation. Before we go there, are you able to get the gynoid android ratio with your app?
Yes.
Are you there yet?
Yes.
You've got that. Okay,
Yeah,
I missed that.
I got it
I missed that.
It's in the actual report. So because you provide a report that you see in the app, the result, and then if you send the full report to yourself as an email or text message, then you get a whole PDF, and that has a lot more in-depth information. Super thorough.
Great. Okay, so there, for our audience, don't do what Don does and stop halfway. Do what Klaudia does and get the report. So let's go into that. But how do this really cool process of modern somatotyping? We're nearly a century. We're nearly a century beyond when that word was established. So let's talk about how you do this.
Yeah, what's the tech?
Yeah, it's like magic. It feels like magic to me too.
Seriously.
basically, gratefully, I guess, the world is full of magic these days when it comes to technology. And so people's believability has gone, way up, I guess. But basically what we've done is, and remember, this all started back with HRV and stuff. So we weren't kind of born knowing how to do this type of R&D, right?
Mhm.
So I like to make jokes about all the things we didn't know 10 years ago when we started on this. But over the last decade, we've learned a ton. And now we have a really deep bench of expertise within the company on all of these different modalities. So basically I'll give a quick nod to the HRV because it opened the doors for body comp. What we realized is that when you have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people tracking this type of data using gold standard hardware, is that those people are doing it almost like reluctantly because they value the insights so much, but they wish it was easier and cheaper. Almost always. The consumer almost always wishes everything was easier and cheaper, right? What we found is that when you build trust in the community and you build relationships with the community, they actually will go with you on that journey of R&D. And did that with HRV, heart rate, respiration rate, and now body composition. We've had over 43,000 people from all over the world volunteer to scan their bodies with gold standard hardware and take pictures and images of their bodies and contribute those to our research to help us develop these algorithms. And so we do a lot of our own internal, R&D in the sense of studying algorithms, signal processing and segmenting and like all these different things that Don mentioned a few of earlier. But a really big component of it is collecting that ground truth data and applying machine learning in various ways. So we were an AI company before ChatGPT came out.
There's been a lot of them.
Right. And now people think of AI as like chat experiences or image generation and things. But, the vast majority of AI that's done in the world for most companies is still machine learning based AI, where we're taking large data sets that need to be cleaned and labeled and organized, and then applying different machine learning models to those. So at the end of the day, a lot of the magic is in, it's very difficult to get 43,000 people to do these types of scans and image their body and, contribute them to research in a way that gives you a clean source of ground truth data to train algorithms on. And companies have tried spending tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in some cases of trying to do this type of innovation. And I think it's our secret sauce, which I've openly share with the world, is we call it community-driven R&D. And it's much cheaper and gives you much higher quality data. But the hard part is building the relationship with the community that makes them want to go on that journey with you.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of, we didn't know that's, I spent in the first years, I talked to 15,000 of our users personally over the first handful of years of the journey, just trying to learn what their problems were, how we could make it better and all of that type of stuff. And that, that's just one example of our whole team really leaning in on doing that type of community building. But that data and those machine learning models are what kind of unlock that level of accuracy of the camera being able to, see the image, basically isolate you from the background, account for different lighting conditions, different distances from the phone. Like, you might stand 4 feet away from the phone one day, 6 feet away from the phone on another day. It needs to be able to work with those small changes and not just get tripped up by all these real world conditions. And it takes a lot of data and a lot of training to get it there. But yeah, the result feels magical when it works. And
it's awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
We're not even talking the back camera. We're talking the front camera, which for a lot of phones, it's even less of a quality.
So to that point, Klaudia, we can ride the tailwinds of the fact that everybody like Apple and Samsung and all of these amazing hardware manufacturers have packed such powerful hardware into these devices. So in 2025, the camera is never the limiting factor on basically the type of data that we can get out of there. It's usually the lighting or, basically making sure that the conditions are right for when you when you do the scan. And that's where some of the rest of the dollars in R&D went, is providing that real-time feedback to make it easy for the person, the user, to do the right thing when they're scanning their body and still make it, fun and easy.
So now I wonder, and this may be a even more technical question, but when we're thinking of either InBodies or DEXA scans, obviously there's something that crosses, like with the DEXA, it's an X-ray. With an InBody, there's some electricity that's touching you, sort of like interacting with your physical body. But how does a camera cross my body to measure these levels and ratios of lean mass versus fat mass, etc.? And even with the HRV, you're touching the screen, so there is that PPG aspect. But how is it without any touch?
Yeah, it's a great question. So this is the fun thing about R&D, is when before you do it, you don't know if it will work. And so research and development is inherently unknown. And before we did it, we saw some early compelling research that it could be done. And we have research partners at different universities and research labs that we collaborate with. And they often are teaching us things about what may be possible. And then in any case, we discovered through the research process that the shape of different parts of your body and the contours of your skin and the distribution of those contours actually have a high correlation with what's going on underneath the surface.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so we can't see through you, though. So that's one thing that DEXA will give you that we can't give you, is bone mineral density, right? And so we can probably give you a decent estimate of bone mineral density just because people who carry more lean mass,
See,
again.
Well,
so I don't, well, maybe, but you would actually understand, like Don, comes back to what you said earlier. It comes back to lean mass in that case, because if you carry adequate lean mass, especially relative to your overall height and weight, right? So the lean mass index is actually one of the really key markers here. Higher lean mass index correlates with higher bone mineral density. And then
makes
if you
sense.
put in some behavioral information too, like say, look, that I'm doing some resistance training once or twice a week, that also has a much higher correlation with higher bone mineral density. And then of course there's diet as well. You need to make sure that you're getting minerals and nutrients and stuff so that you can build up those matrices in the bones. But in any case, we're not going to be used as a tool to directly measure bone mineral density. But again, paying attention to that lean mass index and doing those behaviors is ultimately going to get you there anyways for most people. And so, yeah, that's what's kind of cool about it.
You know what's interesting, Jason? We spend a lot of time on our podcast talking about the Martin Seligman model of where psychology used to be bringing someone from -10 to 0, and Seligman said, why don't we help people go from 0 to 10? And I like that. I like that model. And I think you very much live in the 0 to 10 side of this thing. You probably can creep down into the negative to a certain degree. But I believe this is where healthcare is going. The problem, we don't have healthcare. We have illness. We have illness treatment reimbursement system is what we have. But we're not treating healthcare. And I see what you're doing as an absolute, listen, you've got two of my big biomarkers, okay, HRV and lean mass. I think this is really important. A couple things for our audience. You hear us talking about correlation and relationships. The only way to, it used to be the only way to directly measure body composition was through autopsy. Okay, you cut it off, you weighed it, and that was your body. But you don't respond well after that assessment. But literally most of the body composition mechanisms that we have were correlated to autopsy. So they'd measure and then they'd skin them out and they'd figure out what's going on. Now, MRI is a technology that can directly measure fat mass. And you know what? Maybe one of these days it's going to drop in price and become very approachable. I hope so.
I hope so too.
DEXA is dual X-ray spectrometry. So what they're doing is they're sending two layers of X-ray, two strengths of X-ray through your body, and they create a map of how the X-ray is absorbed, and you have what's called a regression equation. We back into the number through a regression equation. So whether you're using SkinFold or underwater weighing or DEXA or the BodPod or what's the InBody?
InBody.
They're all regression equations, and it's all a matter of error, and it's all about And what's so important is how close you are to the average human. That the further away from that, if you're 7 feet tall, the average male is 5'8". If you're 7 feet tall, you're way statistically out and it probably won't work. But if you're Joe Bag of Donuts, who we talk about all the time on the show, you're probably going to be okay. Now, if you're an incredibly lean wrestler or something like that, you probably have to recalibrate. And if wrestling was a big enough market, it might be worth establishing new aggression equations, but it's not there. But what is incredible, the camera on an iPhone, the camera on a smartphone can have a 95% correlation to a dual X-ray spectrometry unit, which is a $250,000 to $500,000 unit. Depending on what happens with iPhones, we may be a $250,000 one of these days. You never know. But right now, for a unit that you can buy for less than $1,000 that most of us have in our hand already, because I didn't notice anything about, is your phone new enough? I mean, can I go get, I have an old iPhone 11 in my drawer in my office. Can I pull that thing out, fire it up, and make it work?
So our app isn't on iPhone 11, but the camera is probably powerful enough. And again, this
Okay.
back to us just riding the wave of like, cameras being a central piece of the entire phone experience, basically. So what iPhone are we on now? 16, 17, 17. Sorry, Apple. But in any case, you can go back several versions easily.
Okay.
And that's mainly just more of an app maintenance thing than it is like a camera thing. So if you have an older one, you can try downloading the app and seeing how it'll work for you. But most people, I'd say we're a small team. Every company in the world has limited resources. We're trying to support like as many people as we can. And so we kind of cut off the version after a certain amount of time.
Oh, no, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. So, okay, so go ahead, Klaudia.
I was going to paddle forward to a couple more metrics. I wanted to, Don and I talk a lot about VO2 max in this arena. This is really becoming something. So I wanted to see if there is something there, as well as movement and posture. So because obviously there are ways to measure movement. I mean, we're already standing. Is it able to measure asymmetry? And is it something that may be something along in the future, or is it already in the app? I just haven't seen it. So yeah, posture, as well as, is there any indications for measuring VO2 without fancy equipment?
Or instead of VO2, cardiovascular fitness. In general.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So great questions. And I love where your head's at on that. So yes is where we're going with both of those. Those aren't available today. We do see a near-term path for us to innovate essentially like a VO2 estimate or a cardiorespiratory fitness marker. We've done a lot of the R&D already. It's just more a matter of timing and resources to make that ready for the real world use. So that's very exciting. Don, you mentioned like having your key markers, right? Like those
Seriously.
we're trying to round out all of the key markers basically and make those available to people. And the other side with the MSK and mobility and posture, that we have a few partners that we're really excited about that are interested in collaborating with us. And the idea, which I don't know, I like to just speak openly about these things. I'm learning like, are we supposed to file patents first? What are we supposed to do before we say things? But in any case, the idea is that you can basically scan your body one time and get a lot of different markers, right? And so after you do your body scan, whether that's depending on the person and their goals and their abilities, maybe it's turning to the side and doing a unweighted overhead squat or something like that, right? And saying like, what is their shoulder mobility, their thoracic mobility, their hip mobility, their ankle mobility, all from this one movement type thing, right? And Don looks like that's
what is
exciting.
So cool. And I'm going back to my childhood and the TV show Star Trek. And the doctor on Star Trek had this device, I think they called it a tricorder, that they did a scan down the body and boom, here's your health status. Literally, we are flirting with that right now. We are literally flirting with that, which is just, incredible. It's an incredible time to be alive.
Oh, I 100% agree. Yeah, it's for many reasons, but yeah, it's, these are the things that, again, we feel very lucky because we've been sort of in the right place at the right time. with things like HRV and now body composition. And that's sort of paving the way for us to continue to nerd out on, sensors and unlocking more insights and stuff. And then pairing them with the right guidance on then how to actually make change in your life. And, I will say that I have been a 1 foot in the past, 1 foot in the future kind of on these things, because for a lot of people, I'm like, you just need to go outside more, walk more, exercise, move your body more, eat more whole foods and less processed foods, and get some sun, you know, build connections with others. And you don't really need technology for any of those things, but that's just not the world that we live in. And anytime humans have more space, they just raise the bar of their ambition, basically. And so whether that's, juggling more activities for your kids, or trying to get a few extra hours of work in, or, maybe your goal is to watch everything on Netflix, or something like that, right? But whatever it is, people try to pack more into their day or their time. So these tools, I'm coming around to the fact is that it's actually helping people just weigh the pros and cons of their decisions and saying like, look, what can I get away with over here, and still get, the 90% of the results
Love
I'm
that.
for, right?
Love that.
And
So cool.
that's it ends up working much better for people, especially from a psychological health standpoint, to not obsess over saying like, I have to be like every influencer that I see on social
No.
media.
God, no.
The influencer thing is turned. Okay, I'm not even going there. I'm staying away. That was
Please.
me. I don't know if you heard the filter kick in there, but it kicked in. But the point is, and I think the thing that the public has to recognize, and unless you're paying attention to this, our environments dictate so much of our behavior. We live in houses with flat floors. We don't have to climb stairs. We have temperature controlled environments. We have all these things that provide comfort, but eliminate physical challenge, eliminate the need for adaptation. And our genetics are about adapting. That is what when we're adapting at a moderate level, not at a really huge level, but at a moderate level, that is when our health is at the highest typically. This and what this phone is doing, what this device is doing, is basically saying, here's the impact on your genetics based on your environment. Now, let's go ahead and modify your environment with walking, with moving, with red light, with all these things. And oh, by the way, get some nutrient-dense food in your mouth. This really starts to move the needle. Jason, so we've talked a little bit about the fact that this is a correlative tool, which means it doesn't work for everyone. Okay. But it works for most people. I think I'm very comfortable making that statement. Who do you think it works best for?
Yeah, I mean, you actually articulated it well earlier. So if you think about it like a bell curve, right? So if you've got your competitive wrestlers and bodybuilders on one end where they have extremely low body fat percentages, high muscularity, that's difficult for the average person to even understand how dense the muscularity of those individuals are, it's not really the tool for those people. Right. And so that doesn't mean all athletes. It just means that there's specific sports where body composition is like a key aspect of the sport. And, when you start to get to those extreme ranges of low body fat percentage and high muscle density, actually some people report still getting good utility out of it, but we just don't have enough training data and confidence to say that it's the right tool for those audiences. And then there's specific medical conditions, like pregnancy obviously is not a medical condition. I didn't mean to convey it that way, but basically there's health statuses or states that people would be in where we're like, definitely don't use this while you're pregnant. And even 6 months postpartum, we recommend waiting a period of time before, in general, I think,
for hormone normalization.
Yeah, hormone normalization. Plus, there's a lot of other things going on in your life where paying attention to these things can cause more stress than good. And so, those are some things to keep in mind. At the very extreme end of obesity, or if you have like diabetes that is pretty advanced or anything like that, we don't recommend this tool for those populations.
And that's a healthcare issue. We're not 0 to 10 there. We're 0 to -10 there. So that's what's really important about that.
Right. But the good news, to your point again with the bell curve, is that, like, you know, 90% of people will stick with the theme of the show, I think, right here, is that 90% of the people fall into this standard deviation range where they can get a lot of utility out of this. And at the end of the day, another thing that's different about measuring these measurements more frequently, we learned this back with HRV, and you learned it probably before I did, even on that, Don, or maybe even way before, since your days at Polar. But in any case, when you can measure things more frequently, you actually can build a more reliable model for decision making.
Absolutely.
100%. Yeah.
And so the same we're learning with body composition. Now, your body composition doesn't change on a daily basis in a meaningful way. So your weight can, right? Because water, you can change water weight, or it depends how much you've eaten or used the restroom or whatever can make your weight fluctuate. But we tell people either measure weekly or monthly, basically. And it depends a little bit upon your goals and what your state is and your relationship with your body and things like that. Monthly is a really good cadence for a lot of people, but it's also difficult to build a habit on a once a month basis. Once a week.
But go get those other tools. Add HRV in there, add heart rate in
Right.
there, add those other tools in there.
Good point. Good point. Yes,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things you can track in between. Exactly. And we also integrate with pretty much all the wearables. So if you're already tracking your sleep and, HRV that way, we can bring that data into the platform.
Oh, good. That was a question I had.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yep. And food logging as well. We basically got a lot of feedback that food is one of the major contributors to body composition. And so, yeah. So we built food logging straight into the platform.
And you have coaching too.
Coaching as well, right? Yeah. So, and for that, we are very passionate about partnering with coaches and practitioners. And so, I believe, as a former coach myself, that coaching and guidance from other humans is going to
Yes.
continue to be an important aspect of our collective journeys. And so we partner with coaches, and we have an AI component to that, but
Yeah.
that's kind of like an assistant coach, basically.
Yeah.
It's there to answer a lot of the questions that come up when you're on the journey, like, hey,
Oh, very good.
basically, I'm going to a cafe, I'm trying to get this much protein. What on this menu should I order? Right. And a coach could get that call at 2 a.m. and not be too happy about it. But an AI understands the plan, understands the principles, understands where they're at, and can help them make choices on a menu like that.
I think that is one of the most practical applications of consumer AI that I've seen. I think that is just,
Thank you.
and I don't know how far you are away from me taking a picture of my plate and it telling me what I'm eating, but I've got a feeling that's going to show up in your roadmap at some point in time too.
Yeah.
Now, when I was going through the onboarding, I picked this hack coach out. Her name was Renee Belts. Just kidding. Renee and I are good friends.
We love Renee.
So yeah, we love Renee. We love Renee and her sister Lauren, and they do what's called the Biohacking Babes podcast, which we really
She's
recommend.
awesome.
Claudia, we got to reach out to them and get them on the podcast. But so, do I have to work with a relationship with Renee, or do I have to work with a coach, or can I use this independently, work with my own counselors?
Yes. So both, either. It's kind of whatever you prefer. So we're trying to make that a little more flexible right now, actually, basically.
Okay.
But the way it works today is if you like Renee, for example, you don't have to necessarily work with her one-on-one in real life. You can just use her AI.
I see.
And
Okay, very good.
that can help guide you on a lot of the basics. But, obviously, if you want to take that to the next level, you would hire Renee, and like the human Renee.
Well, and it's going to be interesting as you start to build data sets. This is where I think your value prop lies, Jason, in the fact that, and I would hope your company would think about doing this. I would love to see a report come out at the end of a year. Pick a date and say, this is how many scans we did this year. This is what we saw. Here's our bell curves. Here's all our stuff. Obviously unlabeled, obviously anonymized.
Yep.
But giving professionals, I believe this is the next level of science. Okay. The aggregation, the extreme aggregation of N of one data. And I think you guys are just absolutely sitting at the tip of that spear. And I'm so excited about this because when someone chooses to work on their own, use an AI coach or use a real coach, step up. Is there a correlation between that and their success? I
Right.
think this is where the real value lies as we build this out in a few years.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, Don, and I know like why we're friends naturally over all these years because that's where my head goes too. And I think that science is basically one of the most important inventions of humanity. And
Absolutely.
it's the thing teaches us things even for like earlier when we were saying about all these things that you can do, like go outside, eat natural food, etc. Through the scientific process and through giving these tools to people, we have learned that if you were to just pay attention to one thing in your diet and that's getting enough protein, that for a lot of goals is going to get you so far.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. And that's the beauty of science is it can reduce these complex problems down to these, simple cause and effect mechanistic relationships, or at least highly correlated relationships. And I think the future of science is in this aggregation of large amounts of n=1 data and applying the intelligence, to that layer, basically. It'll be really interesting to see. Like I heard a podcast from another founder recently that was basically like, at some point, AI will be able to diagnose and prescribe, right? And that may not be a blanket across all things everywhere or whatever. Who knows what the time horizon is, et cetera. But at some point, it seems feasible that may happen.
I
But
agree.
it's going to be a really long time from now.
Yes.
And even if people are already doing it today on ChatGPT themselves or on Claude or whatever their choice is, last night my daughter got a high fever, a headache. We were in there chatting away saying like, here's what's happening to her. What should we be thinking about? What should we be doing? And, it does a pretty good job of walking the line of saying like, I'm not your doctor and you should call a doctor. But if the fever goes over 104, or if she's having trouble breathing, or if she's got a rash that doesn't go away when you push on it, these are all causes to immediately seek care.
And listen, I think the tech is there.
Right.
The issue is, are humans, particularly human professionals, that they see this as a threat to their profession, are they prepared to integrate this? I don't think AI is the challenge. Humans will always like a human with AI better than AI or a human. So I think this is important. I think the tech is there, and it's just a matter. And listen, the idea that you've rolled this into my iPhone or my smartphone is really pretty cool. So as we start to close things up here, so we've talked a little bit about your future. Anything else we need to be paying attention to, Jason?
Well, so, we're one of the things too, again, is that we believe that there's a lot of moving parts on the journey of health, longevity, fitness, performance, etc. And we just think of ourselves as one small but important part of the overall pie. Right. And so we're trying to build partnerships and more of an ecosystem around this to make it easier for you to get what you need in one place. But one of the ways that we're doing that is partnering with gyms and health clubs and coaches and practitioners. So as a former coach and as somebody who's worked in gyms and likes to spend a lot of time in gyms, basically I have a bias to say that those are one of the best places that people can go to build community around health and fitness and well-being.
Sure.
Health clubs offer, and all types of studios and other places build community, they build fitness, they, are really, that's a missing piece that tech really doesn't bring, is finding others who are going on the journey and being with each other and supporting each other. And a coach is actually a shortcut to that a little bit. If you can just pay for it, most people will become friends with their coach, right? And the coach becomes their therapist, becomes their friend, ends up being
their coach, their bartender, and their hairdresser.
Yeah, right. In their wedding party, whatever. But that's kind of one of the things that excites me the most about building all these bridges with the technology side, is it's allowing coaches and practitioners to spend less time in spreadsheets crunching numbers and spending more time looking their clients in the eyes and like just listening and talking and being present with them. And I think that's going to drive the value of that human connection up as we automate more of all the numbers side of everything.
Love it.
Right. So I don't know if that directly answered your question, but basically that we hope to help facilitate more of that going forward. And just the other piece, I guess, is that as an ecosystem, one of the things that I want to get to the point of is making it really easy to say you don't have to measure everything all the time. We're trying to make it to where you can get value just measuring some of the things some of the time and only just the right things at the right time for what you are trying to do, basically.
And it's going to change. Jason, listen, I wear an Oura ring now. And the big reason I wear an Oura ring is because I don't want to wake up in the morning and take my HRV. You just don't do it. I don't want to put a wet transmitter strap on in the morning to measure my HRV. We've been there. We did that 10 years ago. We knew it was important. But my ring is very passive and greasy and slick. The data just flows in. And I think what you've done here, listen, we see smart mirrors, we see this stuff. It's not going to be long until Spren technology is buried in a mirror in my bathroom. And I'm going to walk in and it's going to say, dude, you got work to do, or dude,
Get yourself
you're
to the
doing
gym.
good. Yeah, it's going to be one or the other, you know? So I think literally I'm so excited about where you guys are at and what's happening with this. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Indeed.
Yeah.
It is so nice to see. I think that finally body composition is getting the recognition and access that it deserves, because a lot of people, I think, ignore how important it is and just wait till, I think a lot of women wait until they're hit menopause to get a DEXA scan and to see where they are.
Mhm.
Yet this is becoming, I mean, athletes are starting to do it. You know, a lot of the gyms are incorporating the InBodies, the different measurements to get their members on and get a bait. But still, Joe Bugger Donuts will have no idea what their body composition
Stop
is.
trying to lose weight. Start
Yeah.
trying to build lean mass. The latter will drive the former.
Yes.
Yes.
You know what? I don't know what the dam is on this. I don't know why the breakthrough. Listen, I don't know why every person who exercises doesn't have a heart rate monitor on. I don't understand that. I consider it a failure on my part. It just makes changes so much. The data is so valuable. So same thing with HRV data, same thing with lean mass data, same thing with cardiovascular fitness data, because all these things come together.
Mhm.
Have you played with a Spren age yet?
Like an age score?
Yeah.
So we have thought a lot about that, and we actually have basically, you could say, one of the more comprehensive
Good.
sets of data to build an age score.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
And we're not against it. We're just like cautious about those things,
Yeah.
and
There's a
maybe
lot
to
of
our
people throwing
detriment.
shit at the wall right now that you'd
Yeah.
compete within this, and there's no doubt your data would be a far more effective data set to develop that from. No doubt.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's a good vote of confidence. I think the good news is that I think the market's coming around to the fact that these age scores are not literally your biological age, right? It's just a way to say, like, are you moving in the right direction, the wrong
Right.
direction, right? Which for us is funny because we already kind of look at the data that way, right?
Yeah.
And it's like okay, so nobody likes their first scans results, right? Like when you measure body composition, there are some people, okay, not nobody, baby, but almost everybody is like, hey, the reason why I'm trying to measure my body composition is because I don't like what my body
I'm
composition
not
is.
happy with me right now, and I
Right.
want to
I
change
want to
it.
improve.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's not a reason not to do it, obviously, but we want to be careful with how we communicate about it. And those age scores are kind of a similar thing, right? That there's a lot of incentive for a company to tell you that your biological age is lower, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And similar with any of these measurement tools, we've just found time and time again, calorie burn is an easy example, right? So you could get 5 different devices estimating your calorie burn. They're all going to be different. And most people like whichever one says they burn the most calories.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so there's a lot of incentive for companies and products to try to tell you what you want to hear. But that's just not the stance that we've taken. And
No.
Thank you.
so
That's
we
a
want to
great point.
educate and say, look, there's no shame in anyone's starting point. And you are who you are. We love you who you are. And if you want to change, here's where you're at. And then let's see where you go from there.
And you make that consistent improvement so easy to
Mhm.
access, to measure. And I think that's one of the barriers that you've been able to break, because if people want to measure their body comp, they might not go to the same gym after a while. They might chain gyms or they might not have access. With this, every month or every as often as it's recommended, you measure your body comp, you measure how far you've come within the period of time. After that, the HRV and the other metrics. So you have so many things to understand. Are you improving? Are you stalling? Or are you maybe even going the wrong direction? So I think it's really, really powerful.
Good.
Thank you.
So Jason,
Thank you.
I always send people to elitehrv.com, but I can send them to Spren.ai, correct?
Spren.com. So
Spren.com, excuse
we're
me.
.com there now, but SPREN. So 5 letters. You can find it on the App Store or go to Spren.com, and you can hit us up on social media. I think for Spren, we're at Spren Labs pretty much everywhere.
Sign up for their newsletter. They do a nice job. He does regular interviews with industry professionals. You'll see me bouncing in and out of those meetings as we come, but they're very well done. They're very informative. So again, listen, I like to go back to just that Joe Bag of Donuts out there that just woke up one day and said, okay, I really want to get on the front side of life. And this sounds like I could write a song with that title, but someone's written someone close already. But yeah, and what a wonderful tool for getting this rolling, because you've got the key good data. That's what's so important. That scale, it'll lie to you. Okay. And you can't forget that. But when you start to use some really good tools like this, you get this body comp, man, what a great validator of the work you're doing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate y'all and how much you've already invested in sharing these, this education and everything with everybody listening here. But we also like to learn from you and from the community as people use our tools. That one of my favorite parts about the whole job is hearing from the community and what they're doing with it. So, tag us or shoot us an email. It doesn't have to be public. We're not necessarily just using it for marketing or whatever. We really genuinely listen and want to learn from everybody on that stuff. So,
okay.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And your socials, how much, tell me about I know your newsletter's good. Honestly, I've not paid a close attention to your socials. Where's your best stuff at?
Yeah, we don't honestly pay that much attention to our socials either,
Okay.
but we are there, and Shannon especially and others on the team are responding to people on social. But so at Spren Labs, you can find us on all the socials there. But the best way to get involved is to get the app. There's a free trial on it, so that's the other nice thing is everyone can just go do their scan for free.
And
right
you've
now.
got a special going right now.
Yes, I saw that in the app.
That's true. I don't know when is this going to publish, but basically it's like a Black Friday deal. So we've got a special going right now.
It'll be right on time for Black Friday.
Perfect.
That'll be great. Yes.
So cool.
Yeah, I want our listeners to keep on listening and share this episode with somebody who you think needs to hear it. Because that is our favorite part about this job, this hobby, that we share so much information that a lot of people could use to improve their lives.
And if you'll go to YouTube, to 90% Healthy on YouTube, or where you're getting this podcast from, if you're listening to it on Spotify or on Apple, please hit like. If you comment, we appreciate it. It drives up our reach. Share. Thank you so much. And if you have questions, Klaudia, I met another listener day before yesterday.
I feel like there's going to be a lot more coming.
It was so cool. And I don't know about you, Jason, but literally, we're watching our downloads grow. But literally about a month ago, I met someone that was a regular listener. And I was so excited.
That's awesome.
You're a human. You're not a bot. So I met another one a day and a half ago. So that was pretty cool. We want to hear from you. Please let us know. You can find us on LinkedIn, on the socials, things like that. Reach out. And thanks for giving us your time today.
Thanks so much, Jason.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya.
Bye.